Hi, my name is Rob. I'm from a company called T-Cube Consulting, and today the topic is luxury travel products, a unique bucket list experience. I'd like to kick off with a definition from the traditional dictionaries of what luxury means. Collins Dictionary has it as a very great comfort, especially among beautiful and expensive surroundings. And the Oxford Dictionary defined it as the enjoyment of special and expensive things, particularly food and drink, clothes and surroundings. Now those are pretty good definitions in the traditional sense of what we understand as luxury in the tourism trade. But I think I prefer one of the other ones that I found in the British section of the Collins Dictionary, which says something that is considered an indulgence rather than a necessity. So I think we're going to start off just by taking a look at defining what luxury is from my perspective. Traditionally, it's been seen as something that is expensive, and it's been determined by either Michelin stars, the price points, or the star grading. But I'd like us to consider today that perhaps luxury is something a little bit more about potentially scarcity, and it's a supply and demand. If we take a look at the Botswana scenario with bush camps and delta camps, it's definitely seen as a luxury experience in the most part because it's so exclusive and not everybody has access to that. As we grow in the existing environment that we're seeing that the middle class is expanding, and these people are gaining access to the opportunity to travel more in the luxury space. If we take a look at the growth, I just picked up a chart from one of the publications in my reading, and it talks about the growth of luxury travel trips by distance. We can see that the biggest growing class is actually the luxury segment, which has grown about 6.2% in comparison to 4.8% for the rest of the luxury sectors. Well, the rest of the travel sectors, not luxury sectors. So luxury looks to be outstripping the rest of the growth of the travel market. What does that mean for us in the travel trade? It means that we're certainly going to have to be looking at increasing our interest and our focus on how do we deal with luxury consumers. Luxury consumers who potentially weren't always in the traditional channel, luxury consumers who weren't used to traveling in the luxury segment, who are possibly traveling in other segments or not even traveling at all. And I think that is something that's going to take a little bit of effort from the industry over the next 10 years to redefine how we do business in the luxury space. North America and Western Europe currently account for 64% of the world's outbound luxury trips, but they only make up 18% of the global population. I think traditionally we all know the impact of those markets, specifically on the Southern African sector of the tourism trade in terms of our inbound operations. Amadeus identifies traveler tribes. So if we take a look at that, they've identified 6 traveler tribes: obligation meeters, simplicity searchers, ethical travelers, reward hunters, cultural purists, and social capital seekers. Now, if you need more information on that, I think they're very, very interesting ways of defining different kinds of travelers. Take a look at the Amadeus reports. They're very in-depth, and they'll give you a lot of interesting information. But what they've actually identified in terms of the luxury travel trade is that there's 3 particular groups that tend to drive the main factors or be the main drivers within that group of tourists: the obligation meeters, the simplicity searchers, and the reward hunters. Of course, luxury travel, or any travel at all, is never a simple matter of black or white, on or off, salt or pepper. It's a combination of different factors, and it depends on what the travelers themselves are actually looking for. And it can actually be a combination of different kinds of tourism activities that people are interested in. No longer, it's been my experience, I've worked for the last 20 years in the Middle East, no longer is it just a matter of luxury, top-end hotels, lodges, and accommodations. People are now starting to look for an experiential aspect to their travel. So the hotel or the accommodation and where they're staying has almost become a means to an end in order for them to be able to achieve the experiential interests that they have. If you take a look at travelers that are traveling out of the Middle East, for example, they generally do have the budget to be able to travel and would choose accommodations that are on the higher class of accommodation. Traditionally, they have not been interested in the cultural and the if I can say, the human aspects of tourism mainly. They've been interested in more of the material aspects. As some of the research has shown, people that are in emerging markets tend to want the materialistic things or more materialistic things, whereas people that are traveling out of the more mature markets are starting to look for the almost Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualization, moral and ethical. They've got a completely different perspective on what luxury travel means and what they actually want to achieve out of luxury travel. Going back to my experience in the Middle East market, if we take a look at the next slide, luxury products which continue to pursue outdated strategies run the risk of becoming irrelevant as they lose touch with the evolving needs of Generation Y, that's our millennials, and their influence on buying patterns. What I've seen in the market is that there is a greater sense of immediacy. There's a greater sense of immediate returns. People are shopping online. People are doing a lot of their work online. And fewer people, or fewer and fewer consumers are actually buying in the traditional mortar and brick channel. Having said that, some of the research that I've taken a look at is that 96% of people will do their research, 38% of people will do their research online, and 96% of the people in the luxury segment will do their purchasing through a traditional channel of one form or another. What does that mean to the travel trade? What it means is that we need to become aware of the complexity or the variations in what the consumers are actually looking for. A luxury consumer is no longer just looking for a single experience or a single touch point. They're looking for multiple touch points. We need to realize that our consumers in the luxury market are not only concerned with where they're going to be staying, but also what they're going to be experiencing. Each traveler has a different requirement and a different matrix, a different basket of services that they would like to put together in order to achieve their objective. I think it will be foolhardy of us to continue to think at all that all people are doing is coming to our part of the world or any elsewhere in the world, but obviously Southern Africa is important to us as it's our region, only to stay in a hotel. People are not only looking for the accommodation any longer, they're looking for a composite experience. What does this have to do with bucket lists? Well, generally what we have perceived is that a bucket list experience is one of those experiences that generally has a pretty high price tag. If you take a look at trips to the Southern Antarctic? Yes, the Southern Antarctic. It's an expensive excursion because there's very few people and obviously access is reduced. If we look at places like Masai Mara, it's also, there's a limited amount of resources that there are to go around. And traditionally that is exactly what has happened in the luxury space. Luxury items are generally limited by nature. If you talk about diamonds, gold, whatever it is, there's a value that's apportioned to the scarcity of that particular product. So if luxury products don't work out where they're going to fit into the mix, potentially they run the risk of not being able to capture the business that they're actually looking for. What bucket list areas can we take a look at? Bucket list can mean a number of different things, and it's not just about an individual and a single expensive experience. It's also about cultural interactions. And that's why when I gave you that definition at the beginning, I like the second definition, because that actually means a little bit more and a little bit less strict than the traditional experience or the traditional thought of what luxury is. Let's go back to that. Something that is considered to be an indulgence rather than a necessity. Now, cultural interactions are probably somewhere where we as an industry in the southern hemisphere or in southern Africa can do a lot more than a lot of other destinations. It's something that we have that's unique. We have a very new, exciting, developing culture throughout the region that people are interested in coming to see. People are interested in our history, people are interested in our culture, people are interested in how we do things. People are interested in our political situation and how we progress, or how we are progressing. And that's why I put those into the cultural interactions. People who are visiting, or guests that visit from overseas, generally would like to have an experience with South African people or with African people. This is something that they're not used to at home, and if we go back to the Amadeus's people, the different tribes, if you read into a little bit more depth into that, you'll find that there are certain key factors that people are looking for. So when it comes to a bucket list, certain markets would be wanting to see certain things. That combination with what they're going to be doing in terms of either a luxury product, and I'm talking about accommodation, could also be seen as a luxury experience because they're going to be meeting people that are not ordinarily available. Imagine someone came across to Southern Africa and had an opportunity to meet with one of the original San tribe. That for them could be an absolutely outstanding experience, and it would be indulgent to a degree, and it would certainly not be a run-of-the-mill experience. Hence I would put it onto a bucket list. Wildlife interactions and natural habitat. Some of the standard ones that come to mind, of course, Kruger National Park. It's a golden oldie, great favorite, but that's because it has such a unique and fantastic experience. I mean, I can't describe it to anyone else. Anyone who's been to Kruger National Park, I think will understand what that's about. Masai Mara, also a completely unique and different experience. The Rwanda gorillas. Now I know we can get onto the topics of animal interactions, but I think this is one of the things that we need to consider. There is such a rarity and scarcity to being able to view or experience certain of our wildlife, animals or creatures or environments without actually affecting or infecting them. The luxury trains of yesteryear, probably one of my favorites. As a boy, I guess, or as a guy, it's machines and steams. A trip all the way across Southern Africa from, say, Cape Town to East Africa would be, for most people, an absolute must as a bucket list item. Possibly not for some, but definitely for me. Wonders of the world and one of a kind. I think Southern Africa has a lot to offer in terms of wonders. Certainly we have Victoria Falls, and if anyone has been to visit Victoria Falls, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you've ever seen rain going upward, it's a fantastically magnificent, amazing sensation and experience. And then of course the power of the mighty Zambezi. Those have to be, for people who have not experienced it, even if it's not a bucket list item, it will be an absolute wow. A personal favorite, if you really want to get that little bit of a jump on the adrenaline, bloke rounds bungee, one of a kind. 216 meters of pure adrenaline pumping. You can pick the adjective, if it's fear or joy or enlightenment, any one of those would work for you. And then of course our world icons. We have some of the best opportunities for world icons. Nelson Mandela, one of the world's greatest statesmen, and of course Mahatma Gandhi, or Mohandas Gandhi, his real name, were two of the greatest people in history that have affected how our countries have developed. So I think if we take a look at those as bucket list areas, this is just a few that I've highlighted just to give you some idea of what I think are probably pretty common and well-known things. But the combination of those, if you had a cultural interaction in combination with one of the 8 wonders of the world, in a combination with a cultural experience in terms of a historical character, going and tracing the footsteps of Gandhi or the footsteps of Nelson Mandela, or meeting with some of the people that have been affected by, whose lives have been affected by the work that they have done. Those are experiences that can never be taken away. And it doesn't, for me, those are luxury experiences because the value of what you're receiving on that experience outweighs a standard, normal, run-of-the-mill, and would even exceed, in my opinion, staying in the most fantastic hotel that we have in South Africa. And of course, we've got some really, really cracking hotels in the high-end range. So as we round up, let's take a look at what we're actually dealing with here. The millennial culture and the immediacy and rewards. Being in touch and making conversions is about knowing what luxury means to each specific traveler right now. And that goes back to what I'm talking about, it not just being accommodation, but it actually being a whole lot of composite ideas and requirements that come through with a customer or a client. It's about you reading and you understanding what their needs are and what their different touch points are in order to be able to fulfill their needs and requirements. The other thing you need to take a look at there is, of course, multi-generational travel is a growing concept. You're dealing with people that have very, very different requirements, from your millennials at the younger spectrum right up to your golden oldies who are looking for something that's more self-enlightening or probably dealing in the self-actualization realm. So as consumers become older and as markets mature, materialism is less important, while time and enrichment are key. And that's from Ian Yeoman, the travel futurologist. And I think that really, really sums up wonderfully what the opportunities are for us in the travel trade. Looking at the luxury sector, luxury can encompass anything from the mid-range right to the top-end premium brands. But for certain, what we have to do is we have to realize and recognize what our travelers and consumers are wanting every step of their journeys and every part of the way. Finally, back to my friend in the Middle East, Ibn Battuta, well-known Moroccan traveler, says traveling, it leaves you speechless and then it turns you into a storyteller. I'd like to invite you to get your customers together and help turn them into storytellers. Thanks for your time.